All right, so let's take a look here at the Windows System Image Manager and how to use that to create answer files. Find this down in Windows Kits. This is not there by default. I had just already installed the Windows ADK. Okay, so there it is, System Image Manager. It opens up and you can connect to a distribution share. That'd be a share on a WDS server that contains WIM files already. Those might be, just basic WIM files, or they might be pre-configured images. Remember, the answer file can be used to automate the Windows PE process, the sysprep process, or an actual install image, and I'm just going to do some post-configuration with an answer file. Or you can just select a Windows image. So let me select a Windows image. This is actually on the DVD, which I have mounted in the sources directory. You're going to find install.wim. Now I'm not going to grab it from there just because it has to be writable. So I copied that file over to the D drive and we'll open it there. Okay. Now it can't find a catalog file. We're going to have to create one. That's fine. And so then it is mounting that image and it is going to create a catalog file. And once that's done, then we'll see the different areas of the answer file and be able to walk through some of the changes. Okay, so once that has done, then we see the image here. We see the two different areas that I was talking about, okay, components and packages. So packages, feature packs, language packs, that kind of thing. And then we've got under components, this is a fairly large section, and this can get overly confusing real quick. So let me just point out a couple of them. Okay, so for instance, you've got network settings in here. When we scroll down, we've got system settings, TCP/IP, and others. And all these essentially just reference a particular type of configuration. Okay, so under Windows Setup, we've got a number of things that we would be doing. For instance, disk configuration, create partitions, modify partitions, image install, and the actual operating system image that we're installing from, Windows deployment settings, and those kinds of things. Okay, so we'll leave that there. We actually do need to create an answer file. This then these are the phases that I was talking about. I did not mention every phase. So in the Windows PE phase, we would be preparing the disk. Okay, so I would go to create partition. And when I click on create partition up here, it shows me that the applicable passes are Windows PE. And so you would add that setting to that pass. And then when we go over here to create partition, we're going to specify the values. Okay? So we're adding a partition. Okay, we are configuring it. It's partition number 1. We're configuring the size of it. Okay, and then we're configuring the type. So it's a primary partition. Okay, so we would. That's what we're doing on the disk configuration. Then install to. We're adding this setting to that pass. Install to disk ID 1, partition ID 1, okay? And so you go through, and that's basically what you're doing the entire time, is you continue to go through and do those things. Now we've got the shell set up. When we start to click on here, like the auto log on, well, this is going to be in the latter phases. So if I did want to auto log on, I'd add this setting to the out of box experience. I'd put in the username and password and the domain that we're going to be logged on, and likely that would be for the purpose of running some scripts or adding some additional features or whatnot. Okay, and so you would go through, and most likely we'll be following help documentation and testing and adding things to this. Initially, we would go through to prepare the partition and to get it ready for Windows PE. And then also to get it ready for the imaging, okay? So that just at least gives us a visual as to what we're talking about. Now when I get done, I'm going to save it, and then there are going to be, it's essentially just an XML file. You can call it unattend or call it something else. Now I added things and didn't provide values. That's why it said there were validation errors, okay? So, but you would go through and configure the answer file in that way using Windows System Image Manager. Another way that is fairly common to do image-based installations is to set up a reference computer. And so when you set up a reference computer, it's just a system that contains a standard installation, and it's an installation that you're going to then clone. You're going to copy it into an image, and then you're going to use that as the source for deploying it to multiple computers, all of which will now have the same configuration. There are multiple advantages to using a reference system. It is easy to deploy a consistent configuration if you do this, because you get the one system prepared the same way that you want everybody else. You can install service packs and updates. You can install applications pre-installed and pre-configured. And so that can be huge and cut down on the amount of time that it takes to deploy a system that's ready for production. You know, how many systems do you have in an enterprise environment that don't have critical applications installed on them? Zero, probably, right? So the point is that you don't only have to deploy the operating system, you also have to deploy applications. Well, setting up a reference computer allows you to do all that. It allows you to refresh computers quickly and easily if they've had a problem. And then if you want, you don't have to put every setting in there. Additional settings can be applied using policies, but you can make many configuration changes on that reference computer. The issue is that you can't actually just clone a computer. Okay? If I copy one machine and then deploy it to 10 other machines, we're going to have some problems with logons to the domain, with resource access. So there are certain things that are unique on every system. These clone systems would contain an identical, what's called a SID, the security identifier. And so you can't do that, right? You have to have the sysprep tool. That's the final step always when you're dealing with a reference computer for getting ready to clone that system. So what sysprep does is it wipes any unique information, any system-specific data from the operating system. It resets the product activation too. And when the system restarts, it restarts into a little mini setup because you now have to reconfigure the elements that have been removed. That mini setup can be automated and really should be, because otherwise it would be the user or whoever is doing the imaging that would actually have to be providing that information. But this is always the final step. It is right before creating an image. It is a program that is located in Windows 10 by default. So you just go start run and run sysprep and you'll see it. There are several parameters to it. You are going to want to know those. Sysprep OOBE out-of-box experience, that tells the system that the next time it's booted up, it should go through the mini setup wizard, okay? Versus the audit. Audit would allow you to restart it just to make sure everything was set and it's done for testing purposes. You can also then install additional applications. You can reboot or shut down. Generally speaking, we probably shut down because the next time we boot up, if I'm preparing the reference computer, the next time I boot up should actually be to Windows PE, not to the sysprep mini setup. Okay, the mini setup is on the other side after I've actually deployed it, so I need to capture it. So I sysprep it, shut it down, boot it up to Windows PE, and then capture the image. Quiet quit just stops. Quiet suppresses prompts, and then you can specify an answer file that will be used to automate the mini setup. So let's take a look at sysprep. We're not actually going to go through with this, but I'm going to type in sysprep, start run sysprep, and it will open up. If you try to do that in the command line, if you try to do it in PowerShell, it usually fails unless you get to the location of sysprep, which is in the System32 directory. But if you just go start run, then it works just fine. Okay, so this is just located right there. You can double click it. When you double click it in File Explorer, then it opens up in a graphical form. And then instead of the parameters that I'm specifying, I'm just using the drop-down box. So we're either starting in the out-of-box experience or we're starting in the audit mode. I think I skipped over the generalized parameter when we were just talking. The generalized parameter always gets used because that is what wipes that system-specific data. And then my shutdown options of reboot or just quit or shut down. Okay, so basically I would do that, I would hit OK, and it would do its thing. Now I'm not going to do it, but those are the steps that you would take with the system preparation tool on your reference computer. Next would come Windows PE, and so we've discussed this briefly. It's a special version of the operating system. It is used here to prepare the system for imaging and installation. It can also be used in recovery scenarios. It replaces basically the old MS-DOS startup disks. You can start it from removable media. If you have WDS in your environment, then you're probably going to be loading this. It's called a boot image. Boot.wim is what it is on the product DVD, but you can create your own custom boot image that has certain tools that you might need, instructions or whatnot, and you can store that on a WDS server and then grab that image. So do a PXE boot, hit the server, grab the boot image, and then once the boot image comes down, you've got Windows PE running. At that point, you probably would have a script that would be used to run DiskPart and get the system ready for imaging. Now, if I'm on the reference computer, I'm creating bootable media, booting it up to Windows PE, and then I'm going to use DISM to capture the image off of that computer. This does replace startup disk, MS-DOS startup disk. It has native support for NTFS, native support for TCP/IP networking and file sharing. So right off the bat, you can map a network drive. It does include Hyper-V drivers, and it's got native support for both 32-bit and 64-bit device drivers. In the imaging process, Windows PE is going to be used to capture images on a reference computer. It's also going to be used on the other end to apply images. On that end, it would be used as well to partition and format hard disk, to access network shares and whatnot. It is customizable. There are several utilities that you can use in order to customize it. Copy PE, and this is a file that's a part of the Windows ADK, is used to actually build a Windows PE environment. DISM is used to mount and manage the Windows PE image, and then the Make Win PE media is used to create an actual ISO that you can then burn onto a DVD. There's a lot of different optional components, which would include, Windows PowerShell and adding scripts to automate this whole process. Once the reference computer is booted up into Windows PE, then the utility that you're using is DISM. DISM is included in Windows 10. It's also included in the ADK. You boot to Windows PE, you use DiskPart and format to prepare the disk. Actually, that's incorrect. That's not on a reference computer. You do that when you're imaging the system, but on the reference computer, it's all set to go. You use Windows PE, boot it up, and then use the following command: DISM capture image, image file, custom WIM. This is probably after having mapped a network drive, so we're putting it on the network. Capture directory, the C drive, and then the name of the image. On the other side, I'm going to use Windows PE, DiskPart and format, and then the apply image parameter to DISM. Okay, specifying an image file. So once again, we've mapped a drive. Index 1, that just speaks to the fact that it's the first image in the file. Remember, you can have multiple images in a file. And then apply to directory, and then we put C drive there. Okay, so those are the steps that you would use to actually capture the image and to apply it. A DISM is actually capable of more than just that. It's capable of offline management of images. We can mount WIM files using DISM, and then I can add and remove images into an existing file or from an existing file. I can add and remove packages, add and remove drivers. I can enable and disable Windows features, add operating system updates. So Windows updates that have been downloaded can be slipstreamed into that. You can configure Windows settings. You can even add files and folders. Really, the only thing you can't do is install applications. If you're going to install an application, you're going to have to copy down the entire image onto a computer that will now serve as the new reference computer, and make changes that way. So you aren't able to do that, but a ton of other configuration that can be done with the DISM utility. All right, so let's now take a look at the final utility that I wanted to look at, and that was the new one. I didn't really talk about it other than just briefly, just because I was kind of planning on showing you this. So the Windows Image and Configuration Designer, a brand new utility. We can create a customization, okay? And this is just going to walk me through this whole process. We're going to create a Windows image that is based on a WIM file. And so then at this point, I'll just point to that WIM file. Okay? It shows me it's enterprise. Hit next. And finish. And then it will load up those settings. Okay, now we get a graphical tool that is going to help me walk right through this. And this is just extremely slick, okay? Deployment assets, applications. All right, so we have an application package, AppX package that we want to install. Now, I don't have any, but we would just simply be pointing to that and then including that in the image, including specific drivers. Okay, so we would just point at the drivers that we wanted to load, or a driver set or drivers, installing features on demand, Windows updates. Now, once again, I mean, you have to have downloaded these, and with all of these, all of this stuff in the ADK, there's a lot of help. Okay, but these are deployment assets. This is stuff that you need that the image is going to use. Image time settings. Okay, and look at all the different categories. And so we have a ton of categories, and let's just pick a few for instance. You know, TCP/IP interfaces. You add an interface, and then you would be able to customize it. Let's go to Start menu. So Start menu, we are enabling this. It's enabled as true. You know. Show the power button. You can go make modifications in that way. PC settings, display network selection, we're going to say false. Okay, remember at the end of the installation wizard, it asked you to connect to a network, so we can choose false on that. And if you're noticing down here, it's giving you information about what this is going to do. Now, normally it is shown, but it doesn't have to be shown. So you get the help right down there under networking. Oh, that's actually not what I was thinking it was. Going into display settings, the resolution, horizontal resolution, vertical resolution, you can just specify exactly what you want the default resolution to be. If we want to automatically encrypt devices, we can do that. We want to configure audio levels. Under computer, you got computer name. We can specify a computer name. Configure certain options in the firewall. There's a ton of stuff in there. You know, just the profile. So private profile, enable the firewall. Yes, we want the firewall enabled. You know, do we want to disable notifications? True. Do we want to configure certain logs? That would have been done on an individual basis. You know, you can do that. As a part of the setup, we've got the product key. So you can specify a product key. If you're using volume licensing, then you'd have one product key that was probably used for everybody. We've got some shell access. Notice this is actually pretty similar to the answer file. It's just we're doing this a little bit differently. Okay, so auto log on and a username and a password that's going to be used to that. For that, commands that are going to run at first log on. Visual effects, additional Windows features. You know, whether you want Windows Explorer, we don't want Media Center, we don't want Media Player, but we are going to show Internet Explorer, excuse me, I said Windows. Okay, so you can kind of go through and get very detailed as to what you want to have happen. We can create accounts. Let's create a local account, and we would specify, you know, test user. And we would add that account in. So this is going to be existing local accounts. We can specify an administrator password and Plain text is yes or no. Is it going to be visible? So we would say false, and then we would specify an actual value. Okay? So user account control, is that going to be enabled? Yes. You know, we just keep going on and on and on and on. All right. And at the end of this, what do we do? Well, one, you can deploy it directly to a drive. So it'd be like a form of Windows to go. But second, you can create clean install media. When you create clean install media, it says you want to build the image in the WIM file format and you want to save it to a folder location. Okay, so let's go to the D drive and we'll just save it right there. Actually, I don't want to do that. I got to create a new folder in there. Call it test image. Okay, and then it will build that image for me. And it's just going to be a WIM file that I can then use on a WDS server. Now, I didn't, we just kind of flew through those and showed some of the options, but this never existed before. And that was a whole lot simpler than the answer file way, and it takes less time than the reference computer. It doesn't completely eliminate the reference computer, because the reference computer you could probably do a lot more with applications and whatnot. But it's just a unique one, and it's brand new in Windows 10's version of the ADK. So I at least wanted to take a look at the image and configuration designer and talk about some of the capabilities that that's going to provide, along with the other components that you have in the Windows ADK.